Hey everyone, so there's these little surprise boxes that they sell at Hot Topic with One Piece characters from Dressrosa. And I thought they were kind of cool because you don't know which character you're going to get when you buy a box. And so me and my family, we decided to buy some. And these are the ones that we got. And I thought they were pretty dope. I mean, the design looks cool. They look pretty cool. My mother got Luffy, which was kind of fitting because, you know, we call her the captain of the family. Like, she's the one that, you know, keeps everything together because, you know, she's Sencho. By the way, I promise that I'm not being paid by them to say this or anything. No, apologies if it looks that way. I don't do sponsorships in my videos. I mean, because most of this is just like, it's for fun. And it's a One Piece related video, and I thought it was cool, so I just wanted to share this with you. Anyway, because there is no One Piece this week, and given how the last chapter left off, I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about Sanji and Zoro and where they've been and where I think they're going. Particularly though, this is going to be about what these characters should be able to do by the ending of Wano, like near the climax of the arc, but also post Wano. We're gonna kind of like, you know, take this thread and just pull it to see where it takes us. Now, in order to go forward, we kind of first have to go back, especially when it comes to these two. So I'm just gonna go back to Enies Lobby very, very quickly, because I think Enies Lobby is a very important arc because there's one fundamental thing that gets established here that gets pretty much confirmed in terms of how Oda wants to treat both of these characters. So this is a shot of the Doriki system that was established back in Enies Lobby. It's a point system that Oda decided to give us to sort of be able to scale the CP9 members. Now, inadvertently, you can also use this to scale the Straw Hats at the time. So if you look at the system, you could obviously see that Rob is at the top. He was defeated by Luffy. Then comes Kaku with 2200, who was defeated by Zoro. And then just 20 points below Kaku is Jabra, who was defeated by Sanji. Now, despite the fact that we haven't seen this power scaling system be used within the One Piece world since then, since Enies Lobby, I'm going to argue in this video that it doesn't really matter. Because if you look at the evidence from a feats perspective, and most importantly from a narrative perspective, you can tell, like, it's so clear that all roads lead back here. This is the key to understanding Zoro and Sanji's potential when it comes to the series of One Piece moving forward. And by the way, you could also use this system to scale Franky and Chopper as well. If you look at the graph, we have Kumadori, who's at 810, who was defeated by Monster Chopper, and we have Fukuro, who was at 800 points, who was defeated by Franky. Now here's the major difference in that. It took Monster Chopper to defeat Kumadori, and then after that fight, Chopper couldn't move for the remainder of the arc. Whereas Franky was able to defeat Fukuro, and then he was running around. So that 10-point difference that Chopper had over Franky pretty much gets eliminated if you consider the fact that Chopper just couldn't do anything after he defeated his opponent, whereas Franky still could. Now, a while back, I actually made a video talking about the Admirals versus the Yonko, and just, you know, giving you points about, you know, what arguments one could use to sort of scale the two. And it was more than just that, but in it, I established a rule, and this is a very clear rule, and I still hold true to this rule. The sort of guideline, or this rule that I established back then in that video, was that power scaling in One Piece makes sense as long as it doesn't interfere with Luffy's journey. Now, there's actually a second rule that has been in place here. It's been in play for a while, especially post-time skip. And I can't believe that this is the first time that I'm actually saying it out loud or that I'm talking about it. But if you look at the evidence, especially post-time skip, it's there. It's right there in front of you. And the rule is the following. The second rule is that Zoro's strength progression, Zoro's power progression, will make sense as long as it doesn't make Luffy look weaker than him. Those two rules are like the golden rules in all of this, all right? You can take those rules to the bank. This second rule comes as a result of there being several instances post-time skip in which Zoro could have used his capabilities, his strength, to help the Straw Hats achieve their objective in several arcs, and Oda has decided against that. It's happened over and over again since the time skip. If you look at Fishman Island, Hody Jones, Zoro is capable of one-shotting Hody Jones underwater, despite the fact that Hody Jones was playing dirty and he was trying to stall Zoro so that he would run out of air and suffocate underwater. Zoro still one-shots him, but ultimately it doesn't matter because, of course, Hody Jones is the main antagonist of the arc, so even after Zoro one-shots him, Hody takes his drugs, and then, of course, Zoro never gets to fight him again after
after that, but he does get to be bored out of his mind fighting Hyozo. Meanwhile, Luffy gets to defeat Hody Jones. In Punk Hazard, Zoro pretty much fodder dodges Monet, and then in Dressrosa, basically, he defeats Pika. But not only that, after he defeats Pika, Oda has to give him something to do. So what does he do? Like, well, he has Zoro push the birdcage along with Fujitora. So this is probably the biggest example of what I was talking about when it comes to this rule, where Zoro's potential, Zoro's progress can't overshadow Luffy's, because then it's like, well, you know, he's the main character and he's the shonen protagonist, and this is a story about this character, and so if Zoro looks better, it's like, well, no, that goes against shonen rules, so he can't have that. And Oda knows this, which is why he has to come up with these tasks for Zoro to do, right? To sort of justify why he's not, you know, meddling with the main antagonist of the arc, or why he's not helping Luffy take him down. Sanji's performance, on the other hand, has been treated with the opposite effect by Oda. He teamed up with Jinbei against Watatsumi in Fishman Island. And by the way, this is where he states that in order to cook a blowfish, you first have to remove the poisonous parts, the poisonous quills, which could be foreshadowing of him fighting Queen in Wano, but more on that later. Also, speaking of Jinbei, it's very clear that Oda has been pretty indecisive about where and how to include him in the crew. And I think it's because that would just sort of mess up with the order, with the monster trio dynamic that is super important to him. But anyway, in Punk Hazard, Sanji's leg gets cracked when he's fighting Virgo. And even after the fight, this is the most important part, even after the fight ends, because it gets interrupted with the poisonous gas, Sanji shows concern and worry about what would happen if the fight had kept going. So that's a very big tell. And then, of course, later on in Dressrosa, Sanji tries to damage Doflamingo, but ultimately he gets rescued by Law. So I think for the most part, we can pretty much agree that Zoro has had it very easy after the time skip in regards to his fights, whereas Sanji has had the opposite problem of having it very difficult. You know, he's constantly struggling against the opponents that Oda has him placed with. Now, there's actually a very clear reason for why that's been the case, and it actually goes back to pre-time skip, because all these things, like Sanji struggling a lot and Zoro having things very easy, is actually a direct result. It's actually a consequence of a choice that Oda made before the time skip. And that is the simple fact that Oda decided, for whatever reason, to have Zoro train with Mihawk for 2 years. Zoro training with Mihawk is the beginning of the domino effect for Zoro having it easy and Sanji struggling in the new world. And here's why. By the time the time skip took place, Mihawk had been this character that had been hyped up significantly in the series. He used to spar with Shanks, and you know, he was a Shichibukai, greatest swordsman, all this stuff. Okay, so imagine what would have happened if after these 2 years of training with Mihawk, the greatest swordsman in the world, Zoro was struggling in his fights. Like, that would have caused a massive problem, massive disappointment. Now, what Oda could have done in that situation is to have Zoro train with somebody else. Another swordsman, perhaps. A swordsman that was pretty strong and recognized or recognizable throughout the world in his own right. You know, pretty strong dude, but still not as strong as Mihawk. Still not, you know, greatest swordsman in the world level. But the problem with doing that is that it wouldn't be as meaningful as Zoro training with Mihawk. Oda decided to go with Zoro training under Mihawk for 2 years, and in my opinion, I think that pretty much sealed the deal in regards to what was going to happen to Zoro post-time skip. And I would argue that not just what would happen with Zoro, but what would happen with Sanji as well. Think about it like this. You're trying to tell this story, and you have 3 characters that are your main fighters in this story that you're trying to tell. Now, one of them, you can't have him struggle early, because if he does, then that would ruin another character's reputation and part of the world building that you've already established. Now, the second character is your main character, which means that he's the window into the story. He's the character that your readers are going to follow on the journey, which means that you have to find a balance for him between struggling and winning. And you have to do this because if he struggles too much, then the story doesn't move and the pacing suffers because the growth is way too slow. But if he doesn't struggle, then it gets boring and there's really no conflict and no stakes. And finally, you have the third character left, and you know that you can't do the same thing with him that you're doing with the other 2, simply because that would just be way too similar and repetitive, right? So what does Oda decide to do? Well, the option that is left, at least for him, is to have this final third character struggle a lot. So if you look at it that way, Zoro doesn't struggle, Sanji struggles a lot, and then Luffy is the balance between those two.
Now the bright side of this, and this is very important, is that no matter how you may feel or what you think about these different paths that the characters are on right now, they ultimately won't matter that much by the end of the day, because all of these three characters will be exactly where they're supposed to be by the end of the arc. Specifically, I mean by the end of Wano. Like this whole thing about like Sanji struggling and Zoro having it too easy, that's about to change. That's about to end. And it'll end with Wano. In fact, I think the last chapter is kind of like the beginning of the end for that pattern for both of these characters. Sanji using the raid suit to fight Page 1 is actually the perfect way for Oda to get around and actually prevent himself from completely tarnishing and ruining the reputation of the Yonko Commanders. Sanji fighting Page 1 with the raid suit is actually a very smart move by Oda, because imagine what would have happened if Sanji had saved the raid suit for his fight against a Yonko Commander, against Queen, for example. Oda knows that Sanji, even with the raid suit, can't dominate the fight against a Yonko Commander. That would just like be like, whoa, Queen is trash then. So he knows he can't do that. And he also knows that Sanji has been struggling a lot. So, he wants to give Sanji a very clear win, okay? He wants to, make Sanji shine. But he can't do that during the Queen fight, because then that would ruin the Yonko Commander credibility. So what does he do? He gives us Page 1. He can shine in this fight. He can just, take no damage, completely dominate, and then go on to the Queen fight.
We also know that the upgrade from Sanji's raid suit is going to have to be significant, because in Whole Cake Island, the most impressive stat that Sanji had was his speed. He was able to dodge the Katakuri Jelly Bean and Speed Blitz Oven without him even knowing what hit him. And yet, despite these incredible speed feats, Niji actually mocks Sanji in chapter 899 for being slow. After Niji saves Sanji from an explosion, he tells him that at the speed that he's going to get riddled with holes or something to that effect. He's going to be hit by bullets. So at a minimum, the raid suit has to increase Sanji's speed, which is already pretty high. That plus Sanji's raid suit has to be superior to each of the individual Germa 66 raid suits individually, okay? And that's at a bare minimum. At a maximum, I actually see Sanji's raid suit capable of combining all of his siblings' powers into one, all right? That's at a maximum. But we really need it to be superior to them individually at a minimum, because the last thing we need is for Sanji to be in the same situation that Ichiji was in after the Tea Party with his raid suit when he decided to face off against Katakuri. We can't have Sanji in a situation where he's getting choked this easily, single-handedly, by a Yonko Commander. We just can't have that.
I don't really understand the Zoro side quest right now. The whole thing is a little bit confusing and a little bit kind of eerie and weird, but I think it's pretty safe to say that the outcome of the side quest will probably lead Zoro to getting an upgrade, just like Sanji. And this upgrade can come in the shape of him obtaining the Nirai Kitetsu and being declared his legitimate owner. It can come in the way of him obtaining a technique or learning a technique that allows him to boost up his Ashura mode. Or it could also be something that works in tandem with whatever secret he's hiding about his eye. Ultimately, though, the narrative truth of the matter is this. This Sanji versus Queen fight and the Zoro versus King fight has to be the hardest fight that either of these two characters has had in the series to date. This has to be their Luffy versus Katakuri fight. I expect both of these fights to be incredibly difficult, intense, and heck, even controversial for both of these characters, simply because they are proving their worth, that they deserve to be in that top Yonko Commander level spot. And that's not an easy spot to get to. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if these fights leave Zoro and Sanji out of commission for a while. Like maybe they just can't get up, or maybe they're half dead. And we know that these fights have to be intense and they have to be controversial because of what's up ahead. If you follow the natural progression of the storyline, you'll find that what's up ahead for Sanji and Zoro in terms of opponents is literally just more Yonko Commanders. Like you can't get away from that. It has to happen at some point. We have to face Blackbeard. So there really is no rush, no pressure in making Sanji and Zoro look amazing and just have them dominate their fights completely against Queen and King. Because if Oda does that in Wano, then moving forward, it actually removes a lot of the challenge aspect from the future fights that both of them may have against other top Yonko commanders. So the best way to handle it is to have Sanji and Zoro literally go all out. You know, just leave everything on the floor against Queen and King, and then, you know, make the question of, wait a minute, did they really win that fight? Make that part of the discussion, you know, make that a controversial issue, and then later clarify that when they go up against the top Yonko commanders of the Blackbeard Pirates. I mean, because the only possible group of opponents that I can think of that would rank higher than the top Yonko commanders for Sanji and Zoro would be the Admirals. And by the way, this pretty much confirms that the fight against Blackbeard has to come before the fight against the government. Because again, the toughest opponents that Blackbeard would be able to throw Sanji and Zoro's way would all be Yonko Commander level, right? Whereas the Marines, well, I mean, technically the government can make use of the Marines and send out Admirals. And we know for a fact that Admirals are above top Yonko Commander level. So it wouldn't make sense to fight Blackbeard before the fight against the government. And also, I don't see Sanji and Zoro fighting Yonko in the future because Luffy has specifically stated that that's his deal. That's what he wants to do. He wants to take down the Yonko. He wants to go and clash against the Yonko and take them down. So that's Luffy's business, not Zoro and Sanji's. Also, once Luffy surpasses the Yonko, I'm pretty sure that he's going to end up redefining what it means to be Pirate King, as well as the structures of the world that are currently in place. And that includes having a system of 4 emperors. So post Luffy becoming the Pirate King, I just don't see the Yonko system existing just so that Sanji and Zoro can take them on and defeat them. The only possible level that I can think of above Admiral would be that of the Gorosei for Sanji and Zoro, you know, for them to maybe take out one each, one of the Gorosei. Assuming, of course, that the Gorosei are in fact, you know, super powerful and are above Admiral level. That's kind of debatable. We don't know for sure how strong the Gorosei are. That's going to do it for me today, guys. Thanks a bunch for watching. Thanks for your support. Like the video if you did. Comment down below with your thoughts. Do you see Sanji and Zoro reaching top Yonko Commander level by the end of Wano? Do you see them reaching Admiral level or Yonko level by EOS, end of series? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks a bunch again, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.